and we are live. And Cuneyt, you'll know, or if you've seen any of the rest of these, for the first 90 seconds, I kind of just mumble along and just talk, because I'm not very good with uncomfortable silences, just staring at a camera whilst lots of things go on, and there's no noise. It's just weird, so I'm not very good at that. So I just talk for 90 seconds, and kind of fill the void of silence. But yeah, looking forward to this. This should be fun, super engaging, hopefully interesting insights into what you're doing, the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation. We've been having conversations around kind of HR, this topic, and well-being for a couple of years now, right?
Correct.
So yeah, to finally get you on here and have some insights from you, I am looking forward to. I know you're doing more and more of this, keynote speaking, up at conferences, sharing all your advice and knowledge. So yeah, I'm proper buzzing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, me too. It's going to be a great session for sure.
Yeah, probably very different to the conference speeches you've done before. Though this is more, as you said, a frank conversation earlier.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where you brings the candidness from people just sharing and generating awareness. I think that's important.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, so let's get started. See, 90 seconds is always 90 seconds. If you're here watching, and you've made it nice and early, please say hi so we know we're talking to somebody. If not, you can stay silent. That's fine. If you want to ask Cuneyt any questions, please do ask them in the comments. I will ask, or we will answer those as we go. And then, yeah, just enjoy it. I think that's everything. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to introduce myself, because I know you've got some of your friends coming along. They might not know who I am, and then I'll get that bit out of the way, and then it's all about you, all about your information. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Rich. I am the founder and director of Employees Health. I am a high performance executive coach, wellbeing coach. Ryan's here. Hi, Ryan. I'm a wellbeing coach, and help companies, employees, and organizations look after their people and help their people perform at their best, live happy, healthy, and well, and succeed as an organization through performance, really. We've got lots of other bits within Employees Health. We do wellbeing strategy and all that kind of support. So yeah, if you want to ask me any questions about that, please do. I'll always open up a conversation around how we get our people to thrive. Anyway, that's the sales pitch, the boring bit done. Cuneyt, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Welcome, everyone.
As I said already in my mumble, I'm super looking forward to this. This is a topic which is probably not my strong suit. I know through reading and learning and the conversations I've had, I know the importance of this, but it's not something which I've dived into too much around how we look after it, only through kind of seeing some people at different conferences explaining it. And I know this is an area of expertise for you, so I'm super excited to see where this goes and the information and the advice you share. So yeah, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rich. Appreciate it.
So before we get started, let's just have a nice quick introduction, who you are, what your role is, and then we'll dive into that a bit more in a second.
Perfect. Sounds good. So hi, everyone. So I'm Cuneyt Belber. So I'm the Global HR Business Partner at Vodafone. Just a quick introduction around who I am, what I do. So I'm a fourth dan black belt in martial arts. So I've been training for over 21 years in championships, especially for England. So, and my passion for like people, well-being, D&I has came about from doing a lot of training. And when I first, let's say, started in my corporate world, I was not a HR professional. I actually started as a more like a technical program manager, where I was supporting a lot of the data migration to cloud. Working with like solution architectures and engineers. And then, although my initial focus was on technology, but my passion for people and the interactions has led me into like transition into a human resources business partner. And then I moved around a lot of different sectors, from public to private sectors, just to get like a well-rounded HR professional. So yeah, so that is me really in a nutshell. So I'm really excited to be here because I have a good quite knowledge around diversity, equity, and inclusion, how organization could really drive the culture change forward. And it's okay not to know the right answer, but as long as we're having that frank, honest conversation, that's where the real richness comes from.
Yeah, I love that. So let's just dive into your story a little bit more. It'd be great to hear kind of, obviously you started in tech, you started in kind of that kind of industry. How have you kind of got to where you are today as global kind of HRBP for Vodafone? How have you? What's that journey look like, and what have you seen through that journey?
Yeah, the journey actually has been quite interesting because coming like a background without HR into HR was quite a different step. It's just a different pathway. So it did require a lot of vigorous understanding of people and how to support people. So as long as you have the huge drive and passion, and I think that's a good number one tick box. So yep, you've got the the skill set around people and the mindset around growth, etc. But to get to a business partner, it does require a lot of strategic thinking and it does require a lot of specialism because you need to become a well-rounded generalist and you need to understand quite a lot of the HR discipline. So whether if you're a subject matter expert like a COE could be like a talent, you just focus specific on talent development, whereas HR business partners across the different sectors organization does vary depending on the size and scale. But ultimately you are partnering with your leaders. Um, and they quite senior leaders, could be exco or senior leadership teams, and then that's you work with them to drive the people plan that supports the organizational goals and objectives, and how you could drive and change the strategy going forward. And you do have a voice at the table. So for my journey has been quite interesting, going coming from like a technical program management type role, working with a lot of engineers and solution architectures into transition into more like a people role, but I moved around. I think that's what made me who I am right now is moving around different sectors that required me a good, strong, robust of what HR really is and how I could support and be a real effective HR business partner.
Wicked. So what do you think through that learning? What's been kind of the biggest kind of take home bits or the bits you've learned most from the different industries, different sectors?
Yeah, challenging the status quo. And I think that is so important. Challenging how we could do things better, how we can simplify things, um, and how you can also challenge your own HR function. I think that's important as well. So for me, that's been very rewarding because you get to see a lot of different streams, what works, what doesn't work. But ultimately, if you can challenge the status quo and real think that have that change mindset to drive the business forward, that you become a real HR advocate going forward. So for me, that's been the number one takeaway for me is challenge the status quo and how to simplify and make the resources even better. Because ultimately, a lot of the times, and I always can say my personal experience is that when people say HR, oh, they're just a back end function, oh, the process is broken, it's not working. How do we simplify that? I hear that always on a daily basis. Right. So for me, it's really important how does HR adds value to the business, but ultimately how we can drive that and simplify things to support the business, but ultimately make things a lot easier in terms of operations and processes going forward.
Yeah, nice. What have you seen change over the last since you kind of started?
Technology a lot. I feel like technology has had a huge amount of inputs around driving change forward, whether that is on diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether that is on any other initiatives going forward. I think that has been a huge evolving landscape and is continuously evolving. And that's how, how do we utilize technology to drive our initiatives forward?
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to do? How do we ensure that our business strategy, our organizational goals, aligns with the strategy, the trends that we see in the industry, especially around technology, Gen I, artificial intelligence, all of those? How do we utilize that? What we could do to drive that forward? I think for me, that's been a huge evolving, it's continuously evolving landscape, and to really think how does HR plays a huge role in that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's an interesting piece, right? optimizing that, because it's only going to be the future, right? And more bits are going to become a support mechanism. I hope just a support
Exactly.
mechanism. So how do we make sure we optimize that to give you the opportunity, HR people, the opportunity to really do their job well?
Exactly, exactly. I think that's important, and that's where HR also needs to adapt and to evolve and to really think strategic. How could we be strategic business partners? How do we evolve the HR function to support that? So I think it's an exciting landscape, but it's definitely a roller coaster. It is not going to happen day one, but I think it's a journey that all the business as well as HR professionals will go through, and I think that's exciting. If you're really passionate about change and want to see it through, I think this is definitely an exciting space to utilize that technology.
Yeah, wicked, wicked. Um, so let's get on to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is it?
Good question. So yeah, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's just we hear that a lot, and it's like people say, "Oh, these are just like buzzwords, etc." Well, I can say that it has evolved beyond being a mere buzzword. It is in the like in the corporate world. I see that it represents a fundamental shift towards recognizing and embracing differences,
Mhm.
not only in the workplace but also in the society at large. And I think it's really important to really understand that in this dynamic and interconnected world, the pursuit of diversity, equity, and inclusion just goes way beyond compliance, training, just to make sure you do this training. So yeah, tick box exercise. No, it's much more granular level that we need to really explore. And how does different initiatives like well-being plays a factor? How does culture transformation plays a factor, etc. So for me, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a language of its own. Like it encompasses a range of terms and concepts that are constantly evolving.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important that professionals in this area continuously need to update their knowledge through like various channels, such as like workshops, could be training, industry publications, etc. But I think it's an evolving landscape, and there is no right fit answer for this particular concept.
Yeah. No. Good answer though. No right answer, but that was a pretty good one in explaining how what it is and the importance of it. I guess I'm going to ask and kind of see if we can kind of explain why it's so important. What is that? What is the real importance that an organization or why an organization needs to have or consider and play out the diversity, equity, inclusion piece, and why they need to prioritize it?
Yeah, so I think creating an inclusive environment is always about fostering a workplace where every individual feels valued, respected, but also has the equal opportunities. So it involves acknowledging, embracing diversity of its all forms. That includes like race, gender, age, sexual orientation, all the nine protected characteristics on an Equality Act 2010. But also, we need to focus a bit more around how do we implement that into an organization. So this is where the organization needs to think is that how do we create that diversity, right? Diversity does come. We've got stats. We all industry organizations should have a rough idea in terms of, oh, I want to hit this gender targets or female representations or this ethnicity, etc. But the inclusion part is the most profound that we don't really spend a lot of time on. Even though they say that I've got amazing, strong, robust diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of the time is all diversity, but where's the equity and inclusion? Why
Mm,
does that get left out? So for me, I always want every time I focus on this concept, I will talk about how do we really create the psychological safe environment? How do we embed that in the organizational DNA? And
mm,
how do we live by that? I think that is so important in any organization that wants to create that inclusive environment. And how do we tackle microaggressions? So I think it's really important that sometimes that, especially when it comes to microaggressions, often are unintentionally or verbal, non-verbal behaviors that could convey in a workplace.
mhm,
And these actions could be based on anything, could be on race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, even. So I think it's really important to organization to really think how could we create that welcoming sense of belonging environment and how do we create that attraction so we can build that diverse talent pipeline so we can retain people, but ultimately create a environment where people thrive and blossom.
Love that. I've been making notes throughout. And I'm going to play like I'm an alien out of space, so that people need to understand some different elements here. What are the 9 protected areas?
You mean the 9 protected characteristics of the?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's race. So like I said, that could be age, race, sexual orientation, disability, etc. So that's what I will say are the 9 protected characteristics. So there's 9 of those. Those goes a lot in detail. But what I say is that I think what's really important is when we are focused on the 9 protected characteristics, we need to think about beyond that, right, as well. So even though we've got this under the Equality Act 2010 that goes in a lot of detail, what we should not do to any forms of discriminations, but we need to think about how do we create a place where people could thrive. So, and I always challenge the senior leadership team around how do we do that? What do we need to focus on? What does our engagement survey scores shows, and what needs to be done? Sometimes the answer I always receive is, "Oh, I don't know where to focus on," which is fine. I think that that's definitely transparent, and that's we as an organization. Anyway, that's where you generate that realness. But I think it's really important that we need to think about beyond the 9 protected characteristics.
Yeah. Nice. And so, why is this so important to an organization? How does this what's the impact of having a good DEI policy in a place and a culture where companies are including helping their people thrive, and this is a pillar of their organization? What's the impact?
Yeah, I think the impact is huge. The impact, the benefits, the return on investment is second to none, and the list will go on for a lot long. What I can definitely call out is probably if I summarize top 3 that comes to my mind right now will be attraction and retention of diverse talent, and I think that's where you know when we're looking at the very beginning of how do we attract talent. So if they see like you've really got diversity and see a lot of value that you are actually driving initiatives for, that's where you can attract talent. They can see that we are living to our DNA, our behaviors in terms of what we want to do and how we want to drive that forward. But ultimately, this is where people feel like, oh, actually, I feel like I've got a huge success if I do come into the organization. That's where the traction strategy comes. Retention is also important. So if we have higher employee turnover rates where people are leaving because they don't feel valued, or they feel like I feel blocked, that cannot progress in my career, or I feel like I'm getting discriminated, or I feel I'm not getting enough opportunities, I don't feel included, people will leave. And I think that's where organization needs to focus on the talent attraction and also focus on the strategic workforce planning. So how do we attract talent? How do we retain talent? How do we find talent? What place do we need to look at? What kind of advertising do we need to do? What kind of skill set do we need to focus on? So all of these is really, really important when we are focused on that diversity of talent pipeline that comes in and ultimately retain that talent. My second point will be is around inclusive culture. So I think for me it's really important is that well-being plays a huge part into this because I feel like that creates a foundation of inclusive culture. So when employees observe that organization are actively addressing their diverse needs, they'll feel acknowledged, they
Mm.
feel included. So, and this is where the sense of belonging essentially comes from because ultimately you are creating that workplace where all backgrounds can thrive and feel included. So health and well-being huge plays and huge part into this role as well. So I think that goes hand in hand. And lastly, I probably will say is the benefits it helps mitigate bias and stereotypes. So I think it's really important that when we are focused on our unconscious bias and stereotypes, is really important because people feel that the business is taking a serious stance here, that they are leading by example, and they are ultimately challenging the stereotypes, right? Challenging the existing norms and ultimately trying to create an equitable treatment opportunities for environment. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of equality versus equity. Have you heard about that, Rich, before?
I think I have, but go into a bit more detail for me.
Yeah, so like we always say, like people say, oh, we need to create equality, but actually it's more beyond that. I think equity is a stance that we need to focus on. So I just give a quick summary for the audience as well. So equality is more focused on treating everyone the same,
Mhm,
regardless of the individual circumstances or needs. And while equality aims at fairness, it may overlook the systemic barriers and disparities that might like perpetrates inequality. For example, let's say that you are providing the same resources to all students, regardless of their needs, and that may not address the inequalities of access to like education, etc. So that's
mhm,
basically equality in a nutshell.
mhm,
Whereas equity specifically really focuses on that individuals have different starting points. They may require different levels of support to achieve that equitable outcome. And what's really important here is that it involves redistributing resources and opportunities to basically to level the playing fields and address any like systemic disparities, disadvantages, any someone from different backgrounds, and ultimately helps them feel included. So for me, equity is so important when we focus on that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and you can see the importance of how equity over equality, um, allowing people to. So how do I want to put this? Um, Come in from where they're at, I guess, is probably the best way.
No, definitely.
Um, do you have so? Um, I can give you like hopefully a leading kind of question on this. So when companies do DEI well compared to companies that don't do DEI well, is there any kind of statistical relationship or impact? So companies, so if you had two companies together, one company had uh, a fantastic DEI policy and culture, but the other company didn't. Is there an impact statistically that you can go, okay, well, this is the impact of this policy and this culture, and there's a better turnover, a better retention rate, there's a better um, net profit, all these kind of statistics. Is there anything like that around? You can statistically prove this?
Yes, definitely. Like, I think it's really important that when we're looking at surveys, I think what's really good from an internal perspective. So if an organization, one organization is doing really well, another organization isn't doing well, let's say, I think what's really good is that internal surveys that they employ, that you would definitely see an engagement. If you see an engagement increases,
Mhm,
regardless of culture transformation, inclusivity, that's positive trend. So you see more people
mhm,
engaged, more people active. If you see some engagement scores decreasing, could be that could be multiple of reasons, but
mhm,
that's when you need to do that data analysis to really determine what they're saying, what population is coming from, is it male, females, what ethnicity background, for example, etc. So I think the demographics and the data would help provide that. But I think overall, yes, I think the more organization does around DEI, the better the statistics will show. Because ultimately, what I've really seen is that a lot of organization, especially top line, when it comes to like exco, when it comes to like senior leadership team, there's not a lot of representations
mhm,
across organizations. So if they do set up a key goal, say, oh, we want to hit, let's say, 40% of our top line gender diversity by, let's say, 2026, hypothetically, let's say, then they need to live by that example and they need to put huge time and effort to succeed that. And
mhm,
if they've publicly declared that in their annual reports, especially what they're trying to do, that's important. That's where the company needs to hold them accountable to ensure that they are driving that forward and they're putting the policies and implementation to drive that forward. It's good to say that I'm doing this, I'm doing that, but ultimately, if you're not really doing it, then you're not going to see the progress. So I think it's really important to hold the senior leadership accountable, um, because if they don't, then there'll be lack of impact, return on investment, and you won't see an increase at all when it comes to like employees, because employees will say, well, I don't feel valued because I'm not really getting what I need in this organization, then that's going to lead to high attrition rates.
mhm. Yeah. Can we explore the kind of, as you said, this quota of DEI in regards to leadership or organisations? When does it become when does it become the best person gets the role in comparison to actually we need to fill the quota? Where's the line cross? So, for example, if you did blind testing or blind interviewing, and in either way, imagine let's say white British because obviously we're in a British country and that's the thing we're trying to create more DEI on. If they got that role, what's the impact of that person getting it compared to the DEI? And so using agenda rather than just boosting the best person for the role compared to the person who fits that gender or that quota.
Yeah, and I think that is really important, and I see that on a daily basis, to be honest, like Rich as well. Like for me, the idea of like the best person for the role in the context of, let's say, diversity, equity, and inclusion can be sometimes misunderstood. I think it's really important that the concept is around creating fair and inclusive environment where individuals from all backgrounds, right, have equal opportunity to succeed. That doesn't mean hiring or promoting individuals solely based on the demographic characteristics, but rather ensuring that biases and systemic barriers are removed from the selection process. So you did give a good example like blind shifting, etc., or diverse interview panels, or some, we use famous applicant tracking systems in the recruitment, when they do the shifting of applications. But I think it's really important that in order to address like this historical disparities and ensure representation from underrepresented groups, is also important that we need to ensure that if you follow a fair process, an outcome is, like I said, a white privilege has been accepted the role, but you've done a fair selection process, and that's fine because ultimately all backgrounds should be valued. It's not just, oh, we have to hire diversity or ethnicity, because then for my challenge, which I would challenge the leaders for sure, is that we just hit a tick box exercise then. Because you just hit a market, say, yep, I've hired that, move on to the next one. No, that is completely wrong. You will go against your ethos of how you're creating that inclusive environment where we just focus on, because then our more for me is our unconscious bias come in, then our affinity bias will come in because you're going to more likely to employ someone that's similar to you, then that is not inclusive at all. So I think it just goes beyond that, oh, the best person for the role. We need to think broader here, follow the process inclusively, and hopefully the successful candidate will get the role. And I think that is fair. And that's where the HR business partners or your recruiters will help support that journey for all of the line managers.
So correct me if I'm wrong, you're kind of saying in an ideal world, you don't need a quota. You need the company just to be, and the unconscious bias is to not be there. So then actually whoever is the best person for that role gets the job. Rather than there being a quota, like we need to fill this quota. We go with actually we're just going to choose the best person for the role.
100%, 100%. I definitely will live by that because ultimately the goal of diversity, equity, and inclusion is around creating that inclusive workplace, right? Where diversity is valued or celebrated. Individuals are not judged based on their abilities rather than their demographic characteristics. So we should focus on the person who's the best person to deliver on the role, what the skill set they can bring to the role that they're applying for, rather than, oh, we have to hit a target because of their gender diversity. That is wrong. That for me, that is not going around of actually eradicating biases here, because how could you promote equality and foster that culture of inclusion if we are focused on the best person for the, focus on, oh, we have to hit a target, so we're going to employ that. For me, I would definitely challenge that. We just need to think, like I said, the goal, what you're trying to achieve, right, which is around creating that diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's live by that by example, and let's follow a standard fair process, right? And then regardless of the outcome, whoever's successful will get the role.
Yeah, love that. You kind of led to something earlier on, which I want to bring up. This is one of the things I do know around why this is important. I think I know this anyway. So correct me if I'm wrong. The reason why we want that diversity within our organization is because everybody's got different backgrounds, different experiences, different life challenges, and have overcome different things. Will bring different ideas to the boardroom, different ideas to the teams, different ideas to the organization. So just through the different experiences that people have lived through, whether in work or outside of work, they're going to bring a vaster range of knowledge, which allows companies to have a different perspective on the options and things that they're trying to achieve, right?
Correct, 100%. And I think that's well said. Like you said, like it brings that diverse perspective and innovation. So having people, different backgrounds coming together, sharing experiences and lived perspective, I think that's fantastic. And that's where you get the richness of different tapestry of people on around their own experiences, their own creativity, and how they can really, look at things different angles and offer unique solutions. I think that's where organization that embraces diversity often are more innovative and better equipped to adapt to like changing market dynamics. And I think what really I liked about how you talked about like lived experiences, then yes, that's definitely important because I think individuals, right, that have diverse backgrounds, different experiences, etc., different journeys, even. And I think that's where you really, start to bring that inclusive product and services and policies that could resonate with diverse audiences. So from an organization perspective, that's really important, whether that you are looking at expanding your strategy, if you want to target a broad range of customers or stakeholders, having that experiences is really, really important. And knowledge sharing. Like I think employees, like you said, diverse backgrounds brings wealth of expertise, skill set that could really contribute to more like dynamic, collaborative environment. So I think that's really important when it comes to problem solving and cross collaboration, especially if you're global organization that you're operating at scale. That is so important to have that cross collaboration and help increase that employee engagement and retention.
Yeah, love that. Thanks. So I'm going to look at a couple of more different areas. Obviously, this being called the Wellbeing Chat. And I know you touch on bits within wellbeing within your role, but I know it's not your main part. How do we support DEI when it comes to wellbeing?
Yes, that's important. I think well-being, like for me, well-being plays a huge role in DEI, right? I think it's really important about how do we, support employees' well-being could be from mental health, for example, could be physical, etc. So number one, I probably would say is promoting psychological safety. And I think that's really important is, cultivating a culture, right, where psychological safety is vital for supporting the well-being of employees. So particularly for those could be from like underrepresented groups or from marginalized groups even. Leaders should definitely need to encourage open communications,
Mm-hmm.
actively listen to employees. Active listening is really important, and create opportunities for constructive feedback. And well-being for me, that huge part, because if they feel valued, that they can speak safely, not get fear that they're going to get reprimanded, etc., is going to have an impact on their performance management when it comes to it. I think that's hugely, hugely important. And I think how could wellbeing also plays a huge factor is utilizing our wellbeing champions. If
Mm-hmm.
you have any in your organizations, I think that's so important. Could also be your mental health first aiders, even um, to really help employees that might need some additional resources or support, or help them address their needs or wants. And I think that's important to really understand is how can well-being, especially mental health resources, employee assistance programs, could be flexible working arrangements, can actually help accommodate individuals. I think these are really important to really delve in and to understand how they can really, play a huge part. And lastly, just came to my mind is education and training programs, right, all around well-being, because ultimately that helps generate awareness. So if you create a thriving workplace where people feel like they can be the authentic selves, they feel like, oh, my mental health is really taken care of, they feel much more engaged, right? They feel much more themselves, they feel much more proud to deliver and their tasks, their work ethic, etc., and the flexibility that it offers and the reasonable adjustments. So for me, that's where well-being plays a huge part in creating that psychological safe environment. So well-being and diversity, equity, inclusion go hand in hand. They should not go in isolation at all. They should definitely go in hand because they have touch points.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think one of the things from my side, seeing it from a well-being standpoint, everybody's got a different kind of, as I said earlier on, lived experience or belief system, and different cultures or different backgrounds, different ages will all have things going on in their life which might need a different type of support, and a way in which they have to look after their well-being. If you think about women of a certain age going through menopause, and the challenges they face, and then you've got people from a different cultural background maybe going through Ramadan and the way they can eat and the support they need at that point. And so there's lots of different things you have to think about and consider when you're planning a wellbeing strategy and supporting your people through all of this. And Ryan, I'll come to your question in a second. The first thing I want to ask, when you're thinking about everything you've mentioned already, the DEI challenges and the things we can do there, as well as supporting employee wellbeing in the psychological safe space and how they connect, how then are you doing that as in a global role for lots of different countries and areas? How then do you look after this topic?
Well said. Well, where should I start? This is I can go on for. I probably should. You should get a book written Rich by me. No, it's good. It's a very good. It's a very good question. I think looking at it globally, especially if you work in a global organization, huge. I will say, let's say challenges, right? Because obviously you want to create something that is number one is standardized approach, but also you want to create a repeatable solution that could basically benefit all employees globally. Sometimes that never work. I'm not gonna say it works crystal like I mentioned. It doesn't, not always. So to create like this global D&I framework really comes around what the organization goals and the strategies, the values they want to head towards globally, right? What is the end state that an organization is going on? What is the mission? I think once you got the mission, right, and I think that's good, that's clear. But then you need to understand from a pain point perspective for different geographic, what is the pain point they need to focus on? You can't create a global approach without tailoring something. You can create the standardized approach globally, right? The strategy where we need to head towards our mission, our vision, and goals, right? But each geographic location will have their own areas they need to focus on, the different avenues. And I think that's where the localized action plan comes into play, because you cannot fit something operating in UK versus something in Germany, for example, completely different. You've got different stakeholders they need to engage with. You've got the German Works Council, for example. You've got also the legislation, etc. So you cannot create a global strategy or framework without looking at localized what's the pain points comes from it. That's where, once we start looking into that and you ensure that, actually understand what the areas that we need to focus on, that's where you can start looking like how do we create that vision globally and a framework to support that. So I think you need to look, you need to basically utilize the internal surveys from employees, especially comes out, right? That's where the richness and the honesty comes from, where people share about how they feel, what's working in an organization. And that's where you can start looking at your action plans and what we need to drive that forward.
Yeah. Kind of makes sense as well, right? Like once you can have a goal and a mission in regards to the global setting first, and then you have to look within those different cultural or country kind of sections or sectors, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's why you need to, like you said, you touched a good point previously. You talked about, celebrating people's diversity, especially Ramadan, etc. Everyone's needs will be different, right? Every country, especially if you want to roll out an initiative in a Muslim country versus a non-Muslim country, some things you can say, some things you cannot say. For example, LGBT, you cannot discuss in Egypt as a country, for example. So I think it's really important that we need to focus on how do we create, what we need to focus, what could we concentrate on, what the quick wins. Sometimes what I've seen when it comes to doing these global strategies, etc., they want to go full blazing mode. So, yep, I've got the solution. I think we need to leave the solution mode to one side, actually focus on what we want to achieve, what is the narrative that we want to pursue, right? And how we're going to do that, then get into solution mode, what we need to do, how we're going to tackle that, what's the project plans, implementation, all sorts.
Hmm.
I think that's really, really important to highlight here.
Yeah, I also think, as you just said that, again, what popped to my head was like the marketing strategy around that as well. And so
Exactly,
the
exactly.
communication between the organisation and you and the marketing team and the senior leaders, all that kind of stuff, I think is also really important.
Agreed, agreed.
So got a couple of questions here, a couple of kind of fans of you, saying how good your points are and how great you are. So I'm just noticing them. But then Ryan's also asked, I'd love to know what Cuneyt has seen around the need for financial education and wellbeing for employees, and how this can possibly be offered in line with the DEI approach and strategy, and also linked to mental health.
Yeah, no, very good. I feel like financial education and well-being for employees are critical aspects to overall well-being that intersect with DEI in general. So, and that does have a link to mental health. So, I think the number one is addressing the financial inequalities. So, financial inequalities can disproportionately affect marginalized groups due to factors such as like systemic barriers, discrimination, could be unequal access to opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So incorporating financial education and support program as part of your DEI strategy that can actually help address and manage their finances effectively. Um, Now, my second point I probably will say is promoting inclusive financial education. So, tailoring your financial education initiatives to meet the diverse needs of employees is essential for fostering that inclusion. And that could be, offering workshops, seminars, could be online resources in multiple languages. So, ensuring that accessibility of individuals with disabilities also is important. And addressing the unique financial challenges faced by different demographic groups as well. So I think that would give a good perspective how to to support these groups of people. My probably another point could come to my mind will be around supporting the mental health. So financial stress, can have a like significant impact on like mental health. Could be lead to like anxiety, depression, other sorts of mental issues. So providing like financial education and support programs, organization can actually help alleviate financial stress and promote mental health well-being amongst employees. And I think that's really important that offering our mental health resources and support services alongside with financial education that can help the overall employees well-being. And I think that's really, really important to bear that in mind.
Yeah.
And then lastly, just to summarize on here, maybe like promoting career advancement and economic empowerment. So what I mean by that, um, the DEI initiatives that focus on promoting like career advancement, economic empowerment for like underrepresented groups can actually contribute to financial and well-being and mental health. So it's really important that we are providing opportunities for professional development, mentorship, advancements that help the barriers to financial success and promotes that sense of belonging and inclusion within an organization.
Yeah. Love that. Now, that's a loaded question. Ryan runs Finwell, which is a financial education company. So I allowed that question, Ryan. Just remember that. And then secondly, he has also asked another great question. The role of senior leadership and management training and upskilling. So what's the role of senior leadership within all this and the management training and upskilling they can kind of do, I guess.
Yeah, no, really good question, really good. So I think leaders, senior leaders, has a massive role to play here because they are ultimately setting the tone and vision. So they are responsible for basically what is the vision the organization want to pursue. They are articulating the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they demonstrate commitment to have these values through their action and decisions. So it's really important to hold leaders accountable, right? If they are setting that vision, that tone, they need to live by that by example, and they also need to ensure that they're celebrating that and inclusion is being prioritized. So that setting vision and tone by leaders is important. My second point is actually allocating resources. So senior leaders plays a crucial role in allocating resources, including budget, the time, the personnel, to support diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So they need to prioritize that, and they need to ensure that that is lived and breathed in their goals and objectives. That could be their people plan. So working with HR, so what that's going to be, how does that align with the resources they have identified, and how do we sustain these and initiatives effectively? I touched base a bit of accountability, but I probably want to stress that again. I think it's really important that we need to ensure that they are hold themselves accountable. If they are say they're gonna live, breathe, and make sure it is a DNA, they need to do that. They need to establish clear metrics and benchmark the measures, in terms of how they're doing it, what are the key KPIs, how do we, hold individuals and teams accountable for achieving gender diversity, inclusion targets, etc. But ultimately, making sure that they are leading by example and they are investing time. So they need to hold them accountable that they are going to commit to these goals they have basically outlined. And last but not least is investing time and space for management training and upskilling. I think I cannot stress enough on this. I think sometimes, especially in a large corporate environment and maybe different sectors, especially when your day-to-day activities, you might have a hectic day, you just don't have enough time. I think organization needs to create space for people in terms of their upskilling, and we need to make sure that they are being trained and ensure that they are have the essential tools for equipping leaders that manages um, teams on how they can effectively lead diversity, equity, and inclusion. But ultimately, having senior leaders need to invest their training programs at the same time. So they need to ensure that they are have an increased understanding of what unconscious bias is. They have a deep understanding of what inclusive leadership competencies are, what the learn strategies could be, could we create that inclusive environment. So spending time on training upskilling is also important by senior leaders.
Yeah, wicked. Great answer. And I've got one question, I guess, but you might have kind of answered it there. But then I'm going to follow with a big question, also recognizing that we have got, well, where are we? We're 47 minutes already, and I want to finish before the hour because we've all got things to do, right? So what you mentioned about obviously the importance of training and upskilling and creating space, which I completely agree with. That I think senior leaders are asked to do their job, be a manager, and everything else that comes with all of that. But maybe aren't given the time and space to do this training. What training would you recommend is like the priority for managers to do?
Good question. My honest feedback, what trainers could be number one, if they're not aware of that unconscious bias, I think that's a good starting point to really understand how could we help managers, employees to mitigate the impact of unconscious bias in their decision making. Could be through like number one is hiring someone in the team, could be promotions, could be their performance evaluation when it comes to the performance cycle. So this training raise awareness of common biases and provides that strategies of making more objective and equitable decisions. Number two will be inclusive leadership skills. So what I mean by that is that I think this training might comes like focus on topics such as empathy, how to do active listening, what the cultural competences are, how we could manage diverse teams effectively. So I think that's really important because that gives you the good mindset. I think it's just listen to podcasts. And I listen to so many different podcasts online, which are all free, talks about, strategies on how do we create that mindset, how do we create that shift, for example. I think that's really, really important. And I also will say, and what's really important, actually, I read quite an interesting book, and it made me really think, right? And the book called, if I remember, it's called Rebels Ideas. It's called The Power of Diverse Thinking by Matthew Syed. And that book really examines the power of cognitive diversity. And it really thinks about the ability to think differently about the world around us. So I think it really is I think that book really gives it serves like a guiding light, urging us to champion that DEI initiatives in every aspect of our personal and professional lives. So if someone that wants to develop more understanding is look at additional resources online through podcasts, could feel like engaging and listening. So could be speaking to your diverse colleagues, for example, to understand their experiences. For example, maybe you want to be an allyship, you want to be an effective ally, you want to sign up because that's very important. I think that's number one. You can get a good understanding of that. Engage with diverse communities. It's also, I can go on so much on this topic, but I think start exploring, and that's where the key start come. And it's okay not to know the answer. I'm not saying I'm a huge subject matter expert in this field, but I've got so much passion and drive, and to really to also to increase my understanding of this topic as well. So I think it's really important for anyone that wants to understand is to have the real drive and passion
Yeah.
of exploring and self-reflection and awareness.
I think that's important as well, and I think this is where we can ask quite a lot of our senior leaders. We ask them, as you said earlier on. I think fantastic recommendations around training, and unconscious bias. I think is an important one, and also then the other piece around leadership, right?
Yeah,
But I think we also got to be careful of how much we ask of senior leaders because it's a full-time role, right? And it is very kind of asks a lot of people, and potentially passions begin to dry deep. And what you're saying, obviously, you have a huge passion around this area, but the key part is obviously giving someone time to be able to do all of this stuff. And I think allowing people in space to learn on this journey as well, right?
100%. I think that's important. I think that's the ultimate time. We need to just allocate time and investment. As long as we can give time for people to explore that mindset, to think, I think that's good.
Yeah.
And it's okay not to know the all answers. I think that's fine. I think people need to accept that. I think we need to create that culture of not get feared that if I make a mistake that I'm going to get reprimanded or I'm going to get it's going to have an impact on performance management. No, I think we need to try to shift away from that and to create an environment where we actually feel values that, oh, I made a mistake, I've learned for that, I apologize, and let me try and be an effective ally. I think that's so important, and that's why I'm advocating that a lot in my current role is in my organization, but also working a lot with my team to see how we could drive that forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, as I said, I could carry on asking lots of different questions and making lots of really interesting points, but I'm very wary of time. And my next question was going to be this, and it is this: how? So, literally, I mean, you're in a global organization, which is huge and huge and huge, right? And so, I'm going to break it down into something slightly smaller. And it kind of might lead into perfectly into kind of my last question. So yeah, keep it kind of brief if you can. It's a big question. If you just had the UK as part of your remit, and you as a part of an organisation, and so this is why I say kind of think about your UK location, because a lot of people working from the UK as well. Where would you start? How would you implement all of this into the workplace?
Oh, good question. Oh, I'll probably say if I want to try and implement this just in a, let's say, in a UK region, I'll first will start understanding is start by securing buy-in and commitment from the senior leadership to prioritize the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. I think that's really important. So leadership endorsement is essential for driving meaningful change. Second will be assessing and benchmarking. So I will look at probably conduct a comprehensive assessment of the current state of the diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organization. This could be looking at demographic data, could be conducted employee surveys, reviewing existing policies and practices. I will also probably benchmark that against industry standards as well. I think that's important, and that will give me a good understanding of where we are, and also best practices. I want to see like how other organizations are doing, for example, in that particular region as well, to understand in the same market, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I have probably, let's say, my current state, the basically the issues I need to focus, I'll probably then base on assessment findings, and then we'll establish clear, measurable goals and objectives. And I think what's really important that they need to align with the organizational values and strategic priorities. So setting those action could be on a smart. So make sure it's specific, it is measurable, it is achievable, relevant, and even time bound goals. that shows to keep accountability. And then I will just constantly ensure that I'll create like dedicated committee that will help drive this forward, bringing, SMEs, people together, creating a change network, etc. And I think that will probably my remit, and then I will probably go into a little more like the solution mode around, okay, we've got all of those, we've reviewed the current state, we've reviewed what needs to happen, what we need to do, how do we grow on in this implementation, that whether that is training, education, whether it is promoting more diverse talent pipeline, improving our talent management cycle, etc., etc. And then that's where basically we'll go in, and then I'll track that KPIs, right? In terms of feedback from different representatives groups, what our retention rates looking like, have we see decrease of attrition, etc. So that's what I'll probably do from a UK lens, let's say, in the remit. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it was great. I hope some good takeaways there for people who are doing this within the UK or even in different areas. It gives a good example. All right, I'm going to finish up the big question. What are your top 3 take-home bits of advice?
Oh, my top 3 will probably be is don't be afraid to ask. Obviously, always ask. Like if you don't know a question, if you don't know anything, I think that's good. Being very inquisitive and ask, I think that's really important. Because then you have you have the desire to learn and have that continuous feedback loop in process when you're constantly asking. My second will be is challenge the status quo. I don't know if you probably gather, I'm such a huge change catalyst person. So I think if you challenge the existing status quo, I think that's really good, because then you'll see, okay, this is what we need to prove, because you cannot do same thing that happened 10 years ago, over 20 years ago. Technology is evolving. We need to evolve with it. If we don't move where the technology is moving, we'll be out of relevant, basically. We need to ensure that we are challenging the status quo. My third, this is hard. My third point, what would that be? Is ensure you get strong buy-in from the leadership team. So making sure that you get their unwavering support, making sure that they are setting the tone for the entire organization, and they ensure that it is in the DNA. That's what I'm probably saying to sum up.
I love it. 3 great tips, an hour worth of fantastic information and sharing of knowledge. I really appreciate you for joining me and sharing all of this, mate. Thank you so much, and I hope you've enjoyed it too.
Fantastic. Yeah, please do connect with me as well.
Yeah, but yeah, connect with Cuneyt, and yeah, he shares lots of information and all cool stuff he's doing. Cuneyt, stay there. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining and commenting and being there. If you have any questions for either of us, please let us know. The next Wellbeing Chat, I think, is in 2 weeks' time with Katie to talk about stress and burnout. So yeah, it should be another cool talk. She's got a wicked kind of view on it all. And so yeah, so we'll see you soon and have a great couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Nice.